Hi, this is Lucas Scanlon. I'm president of Harvard Tea Party. Today is February 20th, 2012. It is President's Day. So I'm standing in between the birthplace of John Adams on my left, your right, and over here, the birthplace of John Quincy Adams, one of the father-son teams that we've had in the American presidency, and our John Adams being our second President of the United States of America, who first served as Vice President under George Washington. President's Day actually is more than just a good reason to go out and go shopping or for retailers to provide sales. It actually remembers some of our great American presidents, namely George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. George Washington was born on February 22nd, and Abraham Lincoln, I believe, was on the 11th of February. So we combine the holidays over the years into now what we know as President's Day. So what I wanted to do is just share some of the meaningful points of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and what it means to us today as Americans. Our country looks different today than it did when either of those two men were serving in the presidency. But some of the ideas that they left us with actually hold true, very much so, for what we're facing today. So I'm just going to pull some excerpts out of what Abraham Lincoln wrote in his farewell speech. You can research some of this either by reading his full speech or by looking at some of the different summaries as found in various books and on Wikipedia. George Washington on political factions. This is him. Some of his ideas warned that political factions who sought to obstruct the execution of laws created by government or prevent constitutional branches from enacting power provided them by the Constitution may claim to be working in the interest of popular demands or solving pressing problems, but their true intentions were just to take power from people and put them in the hands of unjust men. Does that sound familiar? Next point. Despite Washington's call to only change the Constitution through amendments, he warned the American people that groups seeking to overthrow the government may seek to pass constitutional amendments to weaken the government to a point where it is unable to defend itself from political factions, enforce its laws, and protect people's right to liberty and property. Right now, we have a Senate that cannot pass a budget, has not done so for 1,000 days, and we were not able to pass a federal budget between our Republicans and our Democrats. In fact, probably by August of this year, we're going to hit our debt ceiling again for a third time, at which the time the president's probably going to come calling, asking for more money. So this point about factions, weakening the government to a point where it's unable to defend itself, that's a little bit ominous to me, because we see some of that playing out right now. Our Congress is completely deadlocked because of individual members not being able to work together for fear of their constituent groups and the political factions. And you can call a faction, even the Tea Party is a faction, just like other groups along the political spectrum. Factions cannot control government. If they do, it will go into lockdown, which is what we see today. Next, Washington urges the people to give government time to realize its potential and only amend the Constitution after thorough time and thought. They have proven that it's truly necessary, instead of making changes based on the opinions and the hypotheses of the moment. I think it's interesting, and I imagine history will come to remark about how our current political system uses earmarks instead of amendments. It uses earmarks to pass money, to fund things, to get slight changes, because it doesn't want to approach the process of getting an amendment passed that focuses on the core issue. Where George Washington was warning people about using amendments and trying to tell them to only use amendments to pass thought that seems to be politically viable and necessary after a lot of consideration is passed. Today, instead of passing amendments, now we're passing earmarks. We've gone the wrong direction. So, now George Washington on political parties. Some of this is really remarkable stuff. He made the case that alternate domination of one party or another and coinciding efforts to exact revenge upon their opponents would and had led to horrible atrocities, and itself was a frightful despotism. Washington went on to acknowledge the fact that parties are sometimes beneficial in promoting liberties and monarchies, but argues that political parties must be restrained in popularly elected government because of their tendency to distract the government from their duties. Also, to provide foreign nations and interests access to the government where they can impose their will on a country. Today, we're in the midst of the Republican nomination process. And in that nomination process, it is now possible for a corporation or any interest group to lend any amount of money to a campaign. And that corporation does not have to be American. That means any foreign company or foreign political interest can provide money to one campaign or another. Because of our political party system, we've yielded ourselves and our country over to influence outside of our country of who's going to be elected president. How is this possible? We must take steps to protect our liberty, and to do that means that we protect those ourselves from outside interests or those that seek to influence our government and our liberty incorrectly. George Washington warned us of it at the birth of our nation. The whole reason he chose to run a second term was because of the infighting between James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, because of their alignment with various political parties. He chose to come in for a second term simply because, without his leadership, he felt that his fragile country would fall back into chaos. Today, we've got political systems and parties that are different versions of the same beast. They both claim to be a big machine. They both put together a lot of government institutions to try to control and provide seeming checks and balances to stages of our markets, stages of our lives. And so far, most of that control, it's arguable whether or not there's any valid benefit in it. So I'm raising a flag to say that we need to check how we use our political parties. What is the actual purpose of a political party? Is it just to get elected, or is it to preserve liberty? Lastly, this is George Washington and his comment on religion, or his idea regarding religion. One of the most referenced parts of his letter was his strong support of the importance of religion and morality, and not only promoting private and public happiness, but also in promoting the political prosperity of the nation. He notes that religious principles promote protection of property, reputation, and life, and that these, he states, are the foundations of justice. I'm quoting him, "Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason, and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principle." This year is 2012. We've heard from various Republican candidates about a war on Christianity, a war on religion. We hear the term separation of church and state. We hear of many different instances where we have people that are religious or are not religious having disagreement about what role religion has in our thought in our country. George Washington maintained that it was impossible to have politicians or policy makers functioning with morality apart from religion. How many policymakers have we seen recently in the last 10, 15 years embarrass us as a nation in front of the entire world because of their depraved morality? It's ridiculous to think that we can separate morality from religion and succeed. Our founding fathers fought for liberty. One of the founding principles of Christianity is that in the presence of the Lord there is liberty. This liberty is not liberty in the sense that we're free from bondage, meaning that we don't want to have any kind of religious control upon us, therefore it's all bondage and we don't want any religion at all. That's not the point. The whole point of Christ coming to earth was to deliver us from the binding of sin in our thought, in our actions, and in our heart, so that we can actually have liberty to be at peace and to make right choices instinctively. It is impossible to separate morality from religion. To do so, you're creating your own version of what morality is, and ultimately it will fail. It is my hope that we learn as a country that we cannot separate morality from religion, define our own morality to our own standards, and see that succeed in the long term. I suspect we'll be watching that one play out over my lifetime and following, and I hope we choose rightly. Lastly, George Washington talking about credit and government borrowing. He urged Americans to preserve the national credit by avoiding war, avoiding unnecessary borrowing, and paying off any national debt accumulated in times of war as quickly as possible in times of peace, so that future generations do not have to take on the financial burdens that others have taken on themselves. I don't even think I need to go down that road, but I'll do it just for fun. We're at $15 trillion in national debt. Fairly soon, we won't be at a place where we can actually even pay our bills. Our bonds will be worth nothing. Our credit will be worth nothing, because our politicians can't disagree on entitlements. They can't disagree on war spending. They can't disagree on the size of government. We must get our spending under control. Guess what, people? We need to spend less. Printing money out of the Fed is not a solution. I've taken finance at Harvard. What we've done now is sheer lunacy, and it's a political machine. It is not good finance. When I look at Abraham Lincoln and some of the things that he stood for and what is called forth in people's minds, some of the things that we think about are his Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address. When I look at one of the things that Abraham Lincoln had to do, there were anti-war propagandists who stated that the Emancipation Proclamation would actually hurt peace. His response, was a political statement. And he separated his role in public office from his personal view. So I'm going to quote what Abraham Lincoln wrote, where he's had to separate, because of the role of his office, how that office had one role and one responsibility, but personally he felt a different way. He stated, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freezing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union. And what I forbear because I do not believe it would help save the Union. I've here stated my purpose according to my view of official duty, and I intend no modification of my oft expressed personal wish that all men everywhere could be free." Presidents functions not outside a political vacuum, but inside a political world where they have to make statements that sometimes don't reflect their personal views. In office, he believed that he had to function for the best of the Union. When I'm in public office, my views, personally, and those that I hold politically, may differ somewhat, but they will always harmonize, as did his. It is my hope that our politicians learn how to work together for the good of our Union, for the good of our Republic, and not just for the good of their own constituents or what gets them back into office in the next election. In the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln delivered it at the Soldiers National Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on the afternoon of Thursday, November 19, 1863. In 272 words and 3 minutes, Lincoln asserted that the nation was born not in 1789, but in 1776, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Notice created, implied that there is a creator. He believed in the sovereign rights granted to us by our Creator, as did our founding fathers, not granted to us by government. That is a key principle I'm going to draw out. He focused on a nation and a people and